environment groups, which you heard. So I'll bring onto the stage now because we'll be we've got a couple of speakers who are also involved in this. Simon Vincent, who's the chair of our environmental stewardship theme group, and Phil McKenzie, who's the project manager, the P2P project manager for the environment groups. So if you guys want to come up, and we'll bring you on as we progress through the talk. Right, so you've had these really stimulating talks from science about some really great, promising applications. I'm going to bore you to death with plans and regulations and things, but we've got some good stuff coming with the other speakers. So really, the outline of the talk will be, as I said, a quick update on where we are with our regional plans, what's happening in central government, and then the more interesting sort of response that the industry has to the various issues that we're facing in the environment space. So, as I mentioned, Simon Vincent, who's the chair of our environmental stewardship theme group, will cover that. And then Phil will go on to talk about the environment groups, and then we'll just wrap up with some of the information and resources that we've developed to help farmers. So, boring table number one, but quite necessary. This is something which I give to the branch chairs for their meetings, so some of you guys might have seen this in a slightly different format. But essentially we've got 16 regional councils or territorial authorities who come up with these wonderful things called regional plans, which impact on what you can and can't do on your land. So this is just a summary of where they are with their plans. Basically, if it's operational, it means it's up and running. You're subject to those conditions. Some of them are under operative, but under appeal to the Environment Court or the High Court, and that's like Southland or Bay of Plenty for their Rotorua plan change. If they're in the proposed stage, that basically means that they've put something out. This is saying, this is what we want to do, and you go through the RMA process of having submissions and hearings, and then the hearing panel goes away, decides on what the final version is going to be. So it hasn't quite become operative or a final version. Now, the other aspect around this is that for pretty much by and large for our involvement in these regional plans, it pretty much boils down to are the rules discriminatory or sort of place an undue burden on deer farming relative to other land uses. And for us, that by and large means stock exclusion rules. You guys know that the cost of putting up a deer fence is $25 or so a metre, and that's quite a lot of cost to find if you're required to fence off waterways for maybe some environmental gain, but quite often not. Perhaps sort of a very limited or maybe even a non-environmental gain. So I've just marked those plans where stock exclusion is part of their regulations, and that's usually the red flag for us to come in and assist farmers make submissions. The counterbalance to that stock exclusion is where we and most other primary industry organisations see a practical solution to managing environmental risk is through farm environment plans. So on the far column there, I've got whether or not those plans include a farm environment plan, and depending on the criteria for those farm environment plans, they could counter some of the more stringent requirements for stock exclusion. The one in that column, the one exception there is Otago, where nothing is required, but we think that a farm environment plan might be quite a good insurance for if there are some environmental events that the council then sheets back to the landowner, and the landowner has a farm environmental plan. Then at least it demonstrates that the farm was taking all practical steps to reduce impacts. So that was the sort of all the regulatory side, which DINS does on behalf of the DFA, or assists the DFA to make submissions. Here's a sort of a slightly different view of what's happening around the regions, and that's really the activity that DINS and the DFA are doing over and above those more sort of anodyne RMA processes through the hearings and submissions. So this is really the environment groups that we've been hearing a lot about, and also the advanced party actions. I've also put on another column there, which is basically what else the council might be doing over and above those the plans if they're operational. And so really just noting that in places like Canterbury, where they've got an overarching regional plan, they're continually pumping out plan changes for the various sub-regions or zones in that region. So it's sort of you sort of think it's over, but then a few months later something else pops up. And then here's my sort of at the end. Here's my sort of subjective take on where I think there are sort of concerns for deer farming. So the ones with the dark glasses, it's probably okay, or manageable or livable. And so in terms of Canterbury, the overarching stuff, there's some fish hooks there, but by and large it's probably doable. But these plan changes that are coming up for the sub-regions, some of them will give us some concern. And I think the one region that sort of stands out at the moment as something which we'd be quite vexed about is Waikato, which seems to have taken all the worst elements from the environment from the Canterbury region's plan and sort of added a bit more to it. So so to not to be too flippant about it, it's basically grandparenting with stock exclusion rules and attention to phosphorus and sediment. So there's no let up on any front with that plan, and that's currently under hearings at the moment. So that was the good news. The regional plans are the ones which pretty much impact on your day-to-day life, but I guess the important other leg of that is what central government decides to do, and sometimes that's in the form of things like national policy statements, like the national policy statement around freshwater management, which then direct regional councils to do things. So we know that the government has signalled that it's going to be releasing in the next month or so some announcements relating to the freshwater management, the national policy statement for freshwater management, and we know that some of the topics will be around stock exclusion, intensive grazing, requirements to have good farming practices and farm environment plans, and identifying priority catchments. I think we have in the audience, we've got Mandy Bell, who's actually on the one of the groups which the government convenes for freshwater management, and that's the Freshwater Leaders Group. So they have some input. They also are sort of bound by a whole lot of confidentiality, but maybe if you want to sort of collar Mandy at the breaks and that, she might be able to give you a bit of a flavour of what sort of things they're discussing. So I hope I haven't put you in that, Mandy, but yeah. And then, so those are the immediate things coming up. We've just had the announcement from the government on the zero carbon bill with methane reduction targets and how you treat offsets and things. So you might have seen our press release in response to that. This is something which is occupying all the primary industry organisations on a number of levels. So there's the technical policy level, such as himself, CE level, and the chair level. So Ian, the chair of DINS, will be meeting with the Prime Minister on the 22nd of May with other industry leaders. So I guess there's not too much that I can really sort of say other than we've reacted quite strongly to the government announcement on methane reduction targets. We're busy. We've got a proposed alternative, and we'll be presenting that to government officials and ministers in the upcoming weeks. And then just to round all that off, we do know that there's also government announcement on biodiversity on private land and versatile soils. The versatile soils is more about protecting productive land from urban encroachment, more aimed at horticulture, but there could be some impacts on pastoral farming as well, because as you know that versatile land, good quality land isn't just confined to Pukekohe or Horowhenua. So there may be some land in pastoral farms that may fall under that. We don't know, but it's just sort of something that's coming up, and we'll see what happens when they make that announcement. So yeah, it is a busy space. And I guess the thing is, by and large, for most things, other than the water quality issues, that we do take pretty much a primary industry approach. So it's not just DIN's sort of making efforts. It's a concerted pastoral sector effort. So we're not alone in this respect. So that's all the boring policy sort of stuff, but as I said, the industry has made a response, at least to the water quality issues, and that's been primarily through the P2P, which is basically aimed at practice change at the farm level. It'd be wonderful if we could get the in-market sort of side of things to suddenly pay premiums for our environmentally friendly farmed venison, but I guess we'll just have to wait to see how that develops. But certainly what we can do is get farmers undertaking farm environment plans, as both DINS and DFA have announced last year, and that probably the most effective vehicle is to blatantly rip off the advanced party model and call it an environment group, which Phil is now tasked with setting up. As I said last year, we released our code of practice, so that's sort of an enabling set of information that allows farmers to do their farm environment plans. And under P2P, we've also set up the environmental stewardship theme group, which is really tasked with not just sort of coming up with the tools that farmers, the code of practice and other information that farmers can use, but taking a bit more of a strategic look as to where the industry could be positioned around that environmental stewardship role, which was at the request of the P2P advisory group to take a more sort of wider visionary sort of look at where we should be heading. So I'll introduce the chair for the theme group, which is Simon Vincent, who farms just out of Nelson with his partner Claire, and also we'll just sort of cover the sort of the outline of an environmental plan, which sits under the deer industry strategy, which sort of articulates a little bit more some of the activities that we think we should be doing. So, over to you, Simon.
Hang on. Big one. Okay, so, yeah. So our group isn't to, work out where to put fences or things like that. Claire and I have done plenty of it, but our group is more to provide an overview to all those things. And you even start out, when you even environmental stewardship theme, we even on the first meeting we debated what does even environment cover? And, we debated things like, there are ideas like interactions with nature and natural resources, sustainable systems. But the one we sort of ended up by kind of thinking about was, the environment covers actually the environment in which we operate, i.e. it's everything. It's biophysical, it's social, it's economic, and it's cultural. It's a full, people are doing the individual detail, we're going to try and provide some overall guidance. And then with the group of people, we've got 3 farmers, myself, John Somerville and Mark McCord. We've made sure that we've got people like Alison Jews who put pressure on the dairy industry, was one of the first people to do that, because there's no point in just having a group of people sitting around saying we're doing all right. That's not going to work. So we have contribution from environmental consultants, a marketing representative. We obviously still try and work in, there's no point in reinventing the wheel with like beef and lamb, and Lindsay and Dan also, obviously Lindsay makes a huge contribution, and Dan and others attend to sort of help guide us. It's not easy because, I'd much rather talk about where to put a fence, because there can be 3 or 4 different views, but you'll kind of get there pretty quickly. This is quite, in some ways, esoteric about how you bring all the issues together and give some guidance. And so, some meetings you think, oh shit, they actually achieve much, but gradually you've got to provide this guidance to sort of collate it all together. So when we come to sort of the framework, the first framework is actually coming from the DIN's regulations. This is actually the statutes which even allow the collection of levies, and that's stated to promote and assist the development of deer industry in New Zealand. So the next sort of step of sort of guiding us and where we may want to change it, everyone wants to look at it and change it, is the current strategy which runs out to 2020, so we're getting close to there, so we need to be reviewing that. And if you look at the heading of that, confident growing deer industry, I mean, I actually don't quite agree with that. I would like to see the word growing taken out and put the word sustainable in there, because, growth for growth's sake, as we go back 10 years to the dairy industry, growth isn't a bad thing, but it shouldn't be a goal in itself. So then you look at the sort of the pillars, and we've kind of talked about these generally, but what we're trying to do is trying to help, I suppose if you really try and relate this to the group who's doing where the fence is what we're trying to do is give some guidance on how you get the other farmers to do that, what they need to do with their fence, and then how you tell the market that you've done that and how you prove you've done it. So sort of try and provide some guidance on how you actually get uptake and all those things. So you've got the premium positioning of the deer products. We wanted that, obviously one of our pillars, support our position as safe, clean, guilt-free. And then you look over here at sustainable on-farm value, ensuring farming away which is enduring but within environmental limits, and cohesive and respective industry. We want that respect, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. So yeah, that's my view, and I'd like, I think later in the day we should discuss all of this, but that's one change I think we should be making. So then you come down, the top part is the strategy, and that's okay. As you get down the page, it gets harder, because the next part is actually the goals. And so doing the right thing. And the one thing from the conference here 2 years ago was a guy from Holland who said the real problem with that is actually you've got to do the right thing all the time. Because when you do it once wrong, no one says, well, that's okay, because most of the time the creek's clean. They'll show the one time the creek's bad. And with the modern, internet and social media, that's a real killer. The challenge of doing it right all the time. And so the tasks, so engage with farmers, we try, articulate the standards and adopt the standards. And I think it'd be good to have some debate about, in your area, what your strategies are to try and bring on the farmers who aren't going to do it, because they're going to hurt us too. And then verify the standards, confirm that they're reasonable and they're being done. So then come to the people side, recognise we're doing the right thing, try to make sure, some of, probably particularly the Southlanders will need to change from being a quiet, silent, strong, silent type. We actually need to tell the story. And develop communication programs, so you think about how you're going to do it. Establish local community connections, so you're part of the sector. Establish national level connections. And reasonable rules in place, as we're doing the right thing. And I remember that old saying of freedom's the right to discipline yourself so as not to be disciplined by others. And if we can be doing the pretty right thing, then you've got a fair chance of getting your council to say, hey, this is giving pretty good results, we could do this. Ensure regulatory responses are proportionate and practical. Assist in the consultation process. Gather data to support your position so you actually prove it. And an example of this just last week on our place. Claire went down the road on a motorbike and there was a woman testing the water on our farm on the public road. And when Claire just said, oh yeah, we're doing water tests, there was a change in look on the woman's face. because even those words, it meant we're doing something, sort of measuring something scientific to look at it, not just, oh, she's okay. So don't underestimate the data importance. Assist in policy development. And I guess the other thing that I just go back say is, the final comment I'd make is that when you're telling your story, you know, it's actually the personal bit, you know, that ties it all together. You can tick the boxes, and you can say it's a factory where every box is ticked. But if you can bring in your personal story, it might be that, you know, your father died young, or you know, you've a farm with a handicapped child, or for us, for Claire and I, you know, we started with 2 old cars in 1980, and our daughter lived in a fish crate in front of a motorbike for 3 years between 2 and 5, while Claire was running the farm full time. And when like Silverfin Farms bring people to our place, and when you got like 40 chefs, and a guy's running 4 restaurants in Auckland with 100 staff, don't just think we're the ones with the hassle. And when they see what we go through, that provides the full connection of not just it's safe and it's environmental, but there's a personal connection that they like your story.
Yeah, thanks, Simon, for that run through of the environmental plan, and that'll come up a bit later on today in that discussion session. So be really keen to get your input on what you think we might need to do more or less than that. Just before I hand over to Phil, it's fair to say that in terms of the activity that DINS has been and DFA have been doing up till now, most of that has been in that blue box. So that's all around the regulatory side of things. And I think what we've heard from messages this morning about where we need to do some more work is definitely in that yellow box about that's cohesive and respected sort of side of things. But also, and we're starting to do work in the green box through the P2P work, which Phil will now talk about.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. And afternoon, everyone. Have you noticed when, as groups of farmers, when we get together and we go and visit someone else's farm, that it's really easy to spot the opportunities for things that could be done or things that we could work on? Particularly when A, we don't have to do it, and B, we don't have to fund it from our budget. But on a more serious note, I think we've unashamedly taken the success of an advanced party concept and applied it to dairy industry groups. It's got great support, and I think for me it's a flexible format. It's a small group. It's a supportive group, but it can also be a challenge and help you move your own operation. And when you go back home and you actually reflect on what you've been seeing today, you actually come with thoughts for your own operation as well. So we've, as Dan's mentioned and Lindsay's mentioned, we've got a number of these groups going around the country at the moment, and more underway. And they have as I said, a flexible format. So the aim is that everyone has an operational, active farm environment plan out of the end of it. Some of these groups and some of these regions already have a plan. They already could tick that box, if you like. But that doesn't tell our story. Just being able to tick a box doesn't be able to tell the story. And it doesn't even necessarily mean that you're taking action to get things done. So part of the groups is actually sort of almost motivational in terms of getting on, still building your awareness. There's still a lot we know. Jeff talked about research that arguably we should have started 10, 15, 20 years ago. We're getting into that now. There's, science is a moving feast of opportunity, and we're going to keep finding out new things all the time. So someone in one of the groups said to me, can I do this plan and get it done and get it out of the way and never have to look at it again? And I said, well, tell me any other part of your business, your activity, your life, where you can just do something once and then forget about it. We're running dynamic businesses in a biological environment. Things are going to change, and we need to be changing with them. So the feedback we've been getting is pretty supportive. We do, as part of we've got a number of facilitators who facilitate these groups, as well as me. But we're very like the theme of this conference. We're very reflective on where we are and where we want to be, and they're also action-orientated plans. So they're definitely not something we want to do just to say we've got one of these plans. And the bottom quote there about farm environment plan being a base requirement is, I think, really true. And it was said by one of the farmers in one of the groups, but whether he picked it up from the Minister of Agriculture or the other way around, I'm not sure. But I was at a meeting a couple of days after I heard that, and the Minister said, actually, we just think farm environment plans are a base requirement for running a farm these days. So it's not just a budget you need and a sales plan, you're going to need a farm environment plan as well. The plans are just one part. Obviously, there's a whole range of projects, and I'm just here to help with the environment group plans. But we want to get more groups going. We're not stopping there. That's not a box. I don't tick a box saying I've done 10 plans, so I can sit back now. The more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, we're trying to link as much as possible to advanced party groups. Some of them already have a focus on the environment as part of their reason for being an advanced party, one of the advanced parties has said, let's sort of park what the topics we have for a year and just become an environment group for a year and get our plans done and build our awareness and understand the principles, and then we can build that into our advanced party as we carried on. Like, we don't expect the environment plan to sit as one silo within your business. We don't think about it that way across the industry either. So we're trying as much as possible to look where can we integrate with other projects, particularly P2P projects, and look at how, other aspects of the environment, feeding, welfare, genetics that all come together in a project or two that we can work on together. We're building up people who can help us. We've got a number of facilitators who are working already. Some who have put their hands up and says we're ready to help. It's a busy area. Some of the regions, you'd have seen the happy smiley sad face graph that Lindsay put up. In some of those areas, maybe more the sad face ones, there's a lot of consultants who are flat out helping farmers already, and they haven't really got the bandwidth at the moment to help with these environment groups. But we're making sure that we've got people there to help. And of course, we're linking in across all the other initiatives that are underway. Other industry groups, we obviously have a close link across a whole range of topics. The environment is one of them. We're regional councils. I think it's a testament to the sort of the leadership that's been shown already that the regional councils there's some variation, of course, because everyone's human, but generally they're quite supportive of what we're trying to do. They recognise that we are trying to build an industry. We want to be a sustainable industry as part of the region. I think one of the projects there, the Aparima catchment engagement. So Aparima is a large river system in Southland, which I feel very connected to because I was born on the banks of it. But there's about 8 catchment groups that formed along parts of that, and the ACE project is now taking that to the next level and saying, how do all those catchment groups work together for the health of the whole river. That graph that I think Hamish showed this morning about the health of the rivers, it's there's sort of patches and waves all through those rivers. Less beneficial as they get more intensively farmed in the lowlands and probably not so much in the high areas. But you need the whole river to be healthy. The fish swim the length of the river. They don't just, and they need to get through those bits that are not so good. I think we might be going to talk a wee bit more about the ACE project at some stage in the conference as well. But it's a really, I can see it's a way of the future, is really how we don't just have to get our own industry right. We all have to work as a community as well together. And we've collected a number of people who aren't in an area where they could easily join an industry group. So I've been prototyping a thing which I've codenamed Diego, which is industry groups online. And so I'll be really interested to touch base with any of you who want to be involved in sort of prototyping some ideas. Some of you will have done some of this sort of remote learning, remote study. We're not out to reinvent how we do these things. I'm really happy to piggyback on ideas from other industries and other experiences you've had. So let's work on that if we can. So some observations, I guess, from me, reflections, if you like, on where I think these groups come together in a really beneficial way, and some of these quotes I've just gathered from different areas, but the one on leadership was Guy Lee Matheson from Perrin Ag talking at the Fertiliser and Lime Research Conference this year, which is probably one of the longer running ag conferences in New Zealand. It's been going well over 30 years. And he was giving, completely unbeknownst to me, he was giving a real plug for the dairy industry, having got started on their environment planning in 1994 with the very first land care, or the very first land care planning manual. He was using it to sort of chivvy everyone else along to, why aren't you guys doing what the dairy industry is doing? Dan's absolutely correct. We may have been leaders then. We need to make sure we maintain that position. So it's not a matter of saying, done that, tick, we can sit back. The ownership is this quote came from one of the dairy industry groups, the chair of the Canterbury DFA have got quite an innovative approach to how they're looking at the dairy industry groups. And so because they've all got their plan, they want to help sort of take topics within that plan and sort of bring them more to life for the benefit of the branch and also other farmers. So Stu made a quote there that more than half the result, and he was talking about when you get audited, more than half the result depends on your attitude to it. And what he said was, you need to own the issues that you've got. Don't hide from them, but have a plan. We've got issues. We've got things we need to sort out. It's part of a whole land and environment that we're farming in. But here's our plan for how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to achieve it. And then the final one is probably for most of us, our whole approach in life and our training, our education is focused around, here's a problem, let's fix the problem. So we have this mindset of, what's going wrong around here. So I'd like us to be more like the big pile of dirt on the left that we do have to work with. And our approach should be what's going well around here and how do we do more of it. And I think that's, if we carry that forward on a daily basis, I think we'll really make these environment groups sing, and they'll be a key part of telling our story. So we do have resources, and a lot of fantastic work has gone into that, and the authors of Janet's in the audience here somewhere, key author for this. Released last year. If you don't have a copy, I'd probably be slightly surprised, but that's all right. We've got copies. There's copies actually upstairs that I see. There's an electronic copy. There's copies on the website as well that you can get. We're not sitting back. There's another version in play, which is going to incorporate a lot more sort of I guess a build on the first version. We've got deer facts around a whole range of areas, and I know from these were new to me when I came into this project only 6 or 8 months ago, and these were really helpful. I know some farmers have said we'd like a lot more depth in them. And some farmers have said, that's more than we need. So I think they're a pretty good balance. There's opportunities, there's links to where you go and dive deeper if you need to. But I think they give a good flavour for things that we should have in our minds. There's a range of videos. These are with all the links there, but they're easy to find on the website. And I would echo who was said earlier on that there is some good stuff on the site, and obviously some good people have helped put them together. So I think that's the last bit for me, and I think now we've got time for any of us for questions. Yeah, so.
Yeah, so just to acknowledge the land care, the code of practice. Janet Gregory and Edmund Noonan were the co-editors for that. So let's a lot of credit goes to them for that. The videos were part of a sustainable farming fund project, which Landcare Trust then produced a series of 15 videos in Hawke's Bay, Waikato, Canterbury and Southland. So if you haven't had a look at them, next time you're browsing on your YouTube, check them out. They're actually some quite good things, and you get to see some of your peers larging it up on video.
So we've got a few minutes that we can have a couple of questions. So I'll just I think the microphone might just be hiding here. Oh, there we go. Or maybe I better put, if you had a question, what would it be? There we go.
It's not just a question, it's more a commendation for these guys, because when I signed up as branch chairman, I didn't really sign up to be a lobbyist to our councils, but you get thrown into it, and when you get involved, you get huge support from people like Lindsay and the greater deer industry, and that's made it much, much easier for us. Thank you.
Any other?
I don't know whether it's a question or can we? You've got a certain amount of groups so far, Phil, but we really need to crank it up a couple of gears, I think. And even if we are going to go along with the beef and lamb at 2023, we still got to get more of these farmers taking it more seriously, because it's coming from the whether it's from the messages coming from the markets or from our regulators or from our public. We do need to crack on a bit, I think. That's the comments I've had made to me.
Yeah, I agree. We need to get more and more involved. One of the things which I didn't mention, but is quite true, is that something that I've found really heartening is within all of the deer industry environment groups that we've got going, there's new faces showing up. So they're not people who already belong to an AP or who probably normally come to conferences like this and keep themselves engaged. But they are passionate deer farmers, and they've just seen that here's something that's not too threatening. It's not a big a big field day or a big discussion group. It's an opportunity to sort of, in bite-sized segments, work my way through that. So, yep, I agree. We need a plan to how we scale this, how we roll it up. You know, we're building capacity. We haven't turned anyone away yet, and I think it'll be a long day before I tell someone, sorry, we can't help you. So, yep, bring it on.
A question here, Jamie.
Yes. Have you found it easy or challenging setting like outcomes for these plans? I know with a lot of these things, you know, there needs to be an end point you're looking at, and people come along and say, are we on track? But you need to say what the track looks like and what's the destination of the journey. Has it been, yeah, as I said, has it been challenging or easy to set sort of, I guess, end points and measures in these plans?
I guess for the groups, it hasn't been, because the target's been to get an active farm environment plan going. So that's been sort of the focus for the groups, and even for some members of those groups who have a plan, that, you know, their targets to sort of pass on some of that knowledge or keep learning themselves. So not for that, and yeah, I think at the end of that, you might find some of the groups will actually want to carry on and start building the story around, you know, how we build the cohesive and integrated story to the public and the social license stuff. So I think they will continue to have a life. But you may have been referring more to the sort of plans in terms of, were you talking more about regional council plans, or no, that plans? Yeah, okay, yeah, good.
I think the other thing is, you know, you think about it like your health and safety plan or something else. You do the guts of it, and then there are things which you might need to annually review, or not even annually review, just periodically review. So it's not so. You know, so here's the Wellington bureaucrat telling you things, but you know, it's not something which I think is going to be each week I'm going to pull it out and tick off all the things I've done. And you know, so for example, if you are retiring areas, it might be a 10-year plan to retire an area. So it's not sort of something, this month have I actually ordered the stables or something like that. It's not that sort of thing. So I guess in many ways it is just part of your business, and it's as long as it needs to be, and as long as and within your budget. So.
Can I just yell this one out? Has there been anything done on the blue sky stuff? Like we looked at virtual fencing. Yeah, at one stage, you know, there was the virtual fencing coming forward, and is there room for that sort of blue sky innovation stuff in the stewardship? You know, because fencing is expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Simon might want to quickly comment. Deer Research has been very aware of the virtual fencing potential for deer farming, as I understand it, and Catherine can correct me, but I think that's being looked at in New Zealand for cattle at this point in time, and it may be a little way off before it sort of reaches to deer. But certainly, you know, when any technology that's going to help us, you know, manage stock better and reduce environmental risk, that should be part and parcel of being incorporated into your farm environment plan. And I mean, I think the thing is, you know, if tomorrow we had virtual fencing, it was fully effective for deer, and it was a fraction of the cost of putting up conventional fencing, you wouldn't need a farm environment plan to say, yeah, I'm going to do that. You just probably need an accountant to say you should do that, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, the one I was talking about is the opportunities that could be out there, you know, like when you're walking pivots over wet spots and so forth. And, you know, we see vineyards covered with netting and all that sort of stuff. Do we have to just fence, or can we look at the possibilities of having screens over top of drains and those sort of things that'll keep animals out? You know, it's a bit of blue sky stuff.
So I guess there's two sides to what a farm environment plan is. One is about minimum compliance with what the regional council will like, or, to put it another way, a prescriptive sort of set of things which you have to do to satisfy the regional council. And then the other one is where the industry sort of sees the farm environment plan as you've identified a risk, and then you've then identified what are the actions that you'll take to minimise that risk. So in that respect, you know, anything's on as long as you can justify it. And so if you see an application somewhere else that you think, oh, this will probably work in my situation, to me that's a perfectly logical sort of step to include in your farm environment plan. The only thing might be then is to, as you'll see from our large sort of environment plan, which we've sort of presented up, would be whether or not you had any sort of data or standards to sort of verify that this was effective, and yeah, so that would be the only sort of, I guess, way of sort of assessing whether or not your technique was robust or not.
Okay, maybe the last question. Yeah, Lindsay, perhaps a question for you, and I would be interested, given the demographics and probably the percentage farmers in the room, but how many completed environment plans are in the room today?
I don't think that's a question for me because I can't answer that. But in terms of the demographic, it is quite an interesting. Let's put it this way: the less aged, challenged farmers probably embrace the undertaking of a farm environment plan. Yeah, but maybe maybe a show of hands for people who've got a completed farm environment plan. Yeah. Okay. So I'd say there's probably about a third there. And then Paddy's just made the comment how many people are farmers. So actually, show of hands of people who are farmers, and then I'll just do a rough. Oh, so I'd say it's probably about half of you. Maybe a bit more than half have got a completed farm. Oh, it's Janice Yoda, how many completed and active? Yeah. All right. Okay.
Just a comment here from Ian as well.
Yeah, thanks. Lindsay, one of the things where I think we're talking to a group here that are all actively involved in and interested in what's going on in farming. So in some ways we're preaching to the converted. And I think there was a figure from that survey done from DINS which suggested there's about 40% of those surveyed who said they had farm environment plans. Whether they were completed or what, I don't know. But certainly just from talking to some people, and probably you're talking at the people at the next level down or a bit less engaged, often you talk to them, you say about a farm environment plan on a one-to-one basis, and the question is always how the hell do I start it? And I think that's where one of the gaps is approaching the people individually, and even getting those people into groups, which is a basis of why we've got 3 or 4 environment groups in Hawke's Bay.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment on that because it started with Donald we're really going from almost from compliance to non-compliance and how we manage that. And I think that a couple of ideas. A really good model you could use with your local neighbour is the velveting. That was a little bit scary 2 years ago, but we all got through it. And you think about how that happened, my understanding is only a handful of really difficult people. But firstly, there was quite a good balance between the carrot and a stick. You knew that if you didn't do this, you may not be able to velvet. It wasn't that expensive to tidy up our yards. People had groups. I remember Dave saying, let's get some groups so you can look around and see what plastic you put on the wall and actually practical solutions. So I think that's one of the tools. It's going to be an increasing issue about how we deal with the laggards, because it doesn't help clear an eye if we can say, oh yeah, don't worry about the picture in the paper, he's just a bad farmer. That's not going to cut any mustard. So the laggards are going to become an issue. And that's one tool, is actually saying, one tool is saying, well, you did it with the velveting, this is just as important, maybe more important, and drag them along. And maybe almost the other thing we talked about was almost like a buddy system where we give Dave the most difficult person in Canterbury because he's pretty persuasive, and his goal in 1 year is to make sure he's got an environment plan.
There we go, Dave, we're all sorted. Good.
Bring it on. Yeah. I did him last year, it's okay. Now, as a personal note, I just want to thank Lindsay for all his work. But at this stage where we've just been talking about basic plans and everything else, like when I first looked at when we had the beef and lamb, pretty simple one, and I think Mark Adams is in the room, whether he ought to just give us a quick comment from beef and lamb and how they've come on with their plans, and there's a bit of synergy between both groups. Maybe, I know he's speaking tomorrow, but it's quite apt if he wants to drop a couple of words in now. Mark.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Mark Adams. Yeah, look, we had really good engagement straight up with our environment plans up until about the first 30%. And so your conundrum around laggards is across the board. And you know, we have farmers on a continuum from belligerence right through to genuine mind health issues, and it's knowing just where to and how to pitch. There's a lot of thought going into this, and I think there will need to be quite a bit of cooperation around how we do approach that.
Okay. If $5 for the rural trust though. Okay, there we go.
So I was just wondering which of you three was going to thank the co-funder of the PTP program and the environmental stewardship, our Ministry for Primary Industries.